lead contamination of water. The chief executive says it's not time to remove milk powder restrictions for outbound travellers just yet. And the United Nations refugee chief calls the European migrant situation chaotic.
Good evening. The recent cases of lead contamination of tap water could have been due to the hiring of unskilled workers. This according to a member of the government's investigation task force, which is due to release its findings at the end of the month. The task force's main duty is to pin down the source of the lead contamination. According to sources, the government has collected more than 100 plumbing parts at Kai Ching and Kwai Lun estates, the first two public housing estates found to have excessive levels of lead in their water supply. After examining all the parts, up to 50% lead was found in the soldering material used to connect water pipes. Sources say the committee found some of the connections were very poorly done, with layers of solder wrapped around the joints. They suspect untrained workers were hired to do the soldering job. Task Force member Chan Hon Fai explained that if the connections were properly soldered, the solder would not come into contact with the water much, and hence minimizing the chances of lead seeping in. He said a licensed plumber is supposed to oversee all technicians under him, but given the high demand of building projects, that may not have been doable. Chan also believes using lead-containing soldering material wouldn't save much money for the overall project, but that could speed things up for workers, as lead-containing soldering material has a lower melting point. The task force will publish the results of its investigation at the end of the month and submit a report to the government next month. Meanwhile, the health chief explained why the government isn't conducting water tests for all public hospitals at the moment.
We have to build on a risk stratification approach, and therefore we only target at this stage those facilities which will be treating mainly patients under 6 years of age and those who will be staying in the hospital for a prolonged period.
As for schools, the Education Bureau hopes to begin testing water in kindergartens within this week, with over 900 of them signing up for the test so far. Among them, 5 special needs boarding schools will be given priority.
Well, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying said today it's not time to end the 2-can limit on milk powder for outbound travellers just yet. Speaking before the weekly Executive Council meeting, the CE spoke out against anti-parallel trading protests in Shanghai last Sunday. Leung said the protests were of absolutely no help to Hong Kong's image as a hospitable tourist destination. On the 1-visit-a-week limit imposed in April on Shenzhen residents travelling to Hong Kong on multiple entry permits, the CE said we are beginning to see the intended effects. There is much less parallel trading activities now, he said. Leung said government-hired consultants are continually looking into the issue of restricting the amount of milk powder travellers can carry out of Hong Kong. Turning overseas now, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has urged European Union members to make some fundamental decisions to tackle the refugee crisis, which he described as chaotic. In Hungary, police used pepper spray to try to stop migrants who broke through a police cordon as they tried to make their way to the Austrian border. Alan Buckner reports.
In a temporary reception camp on the border with Serbia, hundreds of migrants broke through the cordon and set off towards Budapest, where they hope they can board buses for Western Europe. They complained of poor conditions in the cold weather and the harsh treatment they were receiving from the Hungarian government.
Treated us very badly. They left us without tents, without blankets, in the ground, without toilets. For 2 days, we could not ever bear that.
Hungarian police managed to herd some refugees back to the camp, but the migrants don't plan to stay long.
We told the police that you won't bring buses for us to take us to the camps. Okay, we will walk ourselves.
Hungary's right-wing government is not particularly welcoming of the refugees and is currently building a 175-kilometer fence along its border with Serbia in an effort to keep them out. For the some 25,000 that have made it to Germany since the beginning of last weekend, the situation is better. In Munich, authorities opened an international exhibition center to provide accommodation for up to 3,000 refugees. They'll be screened before being transferred to other towns where they will enter the asylum seeker process. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker is due to unveil new proposals tomorrow on how to distribute the refugees among member states. French President François Hollande said the country is prepared to take in 24,000 migrants, including up to 1,000 from Germany in the coming days, to help ease the burden. Following a meeting with Hollande, UN High Commissioner for Refugees Antonio Guterres called the current situation chaotic and inhumane. He urged European interior ministers to arrive at some fundamental decisions about the migrant crisis when they meet in Brussels next week. Alan Bucknia, TVB News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe officially won a new term as president of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. He told reporters his immediate plans are to keep working on his economic revival plan, Abenomics. He also plans to keep pushing his security legislation that protesters say can eventually drag Japan into war. The controversial bill, currently under deliberation in the upper house, will greatly expand Japan's logistical support for any UN-authorized force. If passed, it will also allow the country the right to collective self-defense with an ally, likely the United States, if an event critically threatens Japan's national security. Surveys show many Japanese voters are wary of revising the Constitution's pacifist Article 9. Abe's new term will run through September 2018.
Elsewhere in Northeast Asia today, North and South Korea agreed to hold reunions next month for families separated by Korean War of the early 1950s. The decision came after overnight talks that began on Monday among the Korea's Red Cross officials. 100 mostly elderly people from each side will be reunited with their relatives between October the 20th and 26th. The agreement represents a small but important bit of progress for the rivals, who just last month were threatening each other with war. The highly emotional reunions haven't taken place since early last year. Back in Europe, British Prime Minister David Cameron revealed yesterday that a Royal Air Force drone strike in Syria last month killed 3 Islamic State fighters, including 2 Britain. Despite not having parliamentary approval to take military action in Syria, Cameron said the attack was legally justified because the militants were plotting deadly attacks against the UK. Cameron described the targeting of Britain's Raid Khan and Rahul Amin, seen here in an Islamic State recruiting video, as an act of self-defense. The August 21st drone strike represents the first inside Syria. British warplanes have been launching airstrikes on Islamic State targets in neighbouring Iraq.
To Belgium now, where violence erupted yesterday when thousands of European farmers, hit hard by plummeting food prices and the loss of exports to Russia, began protesting in the capital, Brussels. Hoping to ease the crisis, the EU pledged to give the farmers €500 million during an emergency meeting. Sonia Otero reports.
About 5,000 furious farmers from various European states strategically stage a massive demonstration right outside European Union headquarters, just as agriculture ministers were holding a summit. They used 2,000 tractors to cripple the city's traffic in an effort to draw attention to the fact that falling farm produce prices have knocked them into bankruptcy.
The heart of the issue is the liberalisation of quotas, which brought about an overproduction and which has lowered prices, making farming no longer viable.
Violence broke out when protesters began pelting police with eggs and lighting bales of hay on fire. In one tense standoff, police began drenching protesters with water to chase them off. When the angry crowds wouldn't let up, police fought back with tear gas and pepper spray. The protest stopped once EU agriculture ministers vowed to plug the shortfall by granting them the following financial aid package.
Today's proposal Commission proposals is a significant, fast and concrete response to the current situation. 500 million euros, it's real money, which is supposed to help farmers to produce sustainable manner.
EU ministers also vowed to work on helping the milk sector and animal production. This after Russia banned imports of meat, dairy, fruits and vegetables from the EU, the United States, Norway, Canada and Australia in response to sanctions imposed on Moscow over the Ukraine crisis. Before the ban, the agricultural export market was valued at 5.5 billion euros per year. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
Still to come in our news tonight. Former TVB General Manager Stephen Chand and his assistant back in court. The condition of a girl in a suspected abuse case said to have stabilized. And a Neolithic monument found near Stonehenge.
Lifelong commitment is rare for animals, for whom finding a mate can involve winning fights and employing skills as a construction worker. Or is it as an artist? Tonight, Wingshing Photo Supplies presents Life Story at 9:30 on Pearl Spectacular.
We're all born to protect, but for me, it's a calling. There was a fire at Mr. Lamb's and the chef got injured. My team and I immediately took care of everything. Free physio for the chef, a social worker to help his elderly mother, and made sure the renovations began immediately, so that our favorite ramen was back on the menu in no time. I work for AXA. My calling is to protect people. AXA, redefining standards.
超乎想象嘅多汁，新品種 Sabine 陽光金果，營養密度高，營養評分係蘋果嘅10倍，多汁多彩每一天。Sabine 紐西蘭奇異果。
Join us and be part of this dazzling spectacle, the 27th Macau International Fighting Works Display Contest, on September 5th, 12th, 19th, 27th, and October 1st, where 10 competing teams will gather in Macau to fire up a glittering night sky. Touching moments, experience Macau.
They may have been born with silver spoons in their mouths and had the best starts in life. But they've also had to work hard to keep their family name well respected. Starting Wednesday, September 16th, Tissot Chemin d'Etoile Collection presents Tycoon Talk and the Next Generation at 9 on Pearl.
Welcome back to TVB News. A 7-year-old girl who was allegedly abused by her family is in hospital receiving treatment for malnourishment, ulcers and possible brain damage. Police arrested the parents and 2 siblings who have since been released on bail. João da Silva reports.
The girl was unconscious when she was admitted to hospital on July 18th and needed 10 minutes of cardiac resuscitation to revive her. She had ulcers all over her body and weighed only 15 kilos, 3 to 8 kilos below the appropriate weight for a girl her age. The girl's mother, who took her in, said she had fallen in the bath. The Social Welfare Department intervened and referred the case to the police on suspicion of foul play. The parents and 2 twin sisters aged 15 were arrested but have since been released on bail. As for the girl, she is now in stable condition at the pediatric ward of Princess Margaret Hospital. She's conscious but is unable to talk, a symptom of possible brain damage. According to sources, the family lived in a subdivided flat in Chunwan. Both parents are unemployed and live on welfare subsidies. The mainland-born girl had been living in Hong Kong since November last year.